A few days ago, a netizen asked me for my thoughts on Sanai Takaichi, but since the election results were not yet finalized, I simply replied that Japan is not important. My intention was not to say that Japan as a country is insignificant, but rather that in the current international landscape of China-US competition, Japan has no room for maneuver. As a nation that was once hit with atomic bombs by the US, Japan underwent complete transformation under American control and remains absolutely subservient to the US. Like South Korea, it is effectively a US colony with no autonomy. When the US is prosperous, they can share in the Americans' leftovers and live quite comfortably. But when the US declines, they will suffer along with it. The American principle has always been to feed themselves first, then their allies, and finally their watchdogs. Many of my friends tell me that Sanai Takaichi represents Japan's right wing and aims to revive the Abe era and complete his unfinished business. They say Japan wants to amend its constitution and become a normal country, which poses a huge threat to China. I want to continue with the very straightforward style of this channel. These people lack basic understanding of international politics, and many of their views are quite superficial. First of all, Sanai Takaichi is not Japan's right wing. She is just an opportunist who uses right-wing rhetoric to advance her own political interests. Such a person has no firm beliefs and could never, like Abe, steadfastly revive traditional right-wing ideals. What is Japan's right wing? They are the remnants of the militarists from World War II. These people defend a patriarchal society symbolized by the emperor, and true Japanese right-wingers hold a condescending attitude toward women. In right-wing social order, women are merely subordinates in the family, so how could they possibly allow a woman to lead the nation? Sanai Takaichi advocates strengthening the US-Japan alliance and taking a hard line against forces that threaten Japan, such as North Korea, Russia, and China. Such positions are utterly boring and empty because they require no emphasis from Japan. China and Russia dislike Japan because Japan threatens their interests. The heinous crimes Japan committed during World War II will never be forgiven by Koreans either. As for strengthening the US-Japan alliance, that is simply laughable. Does she have the ability to weaken it? Does she think Japan is an American ally that can complain about the dominance of their American daddy at the negotiating table like Europeans do? In the eyes of Americans, Japan is just an overseas colony, a fresh blood bag from which the US can draw blood to sustain itself whenever needed. Does the US-Japan alliance need reinforcement from Sanai Takaichi? If the US mobilizes Japanese military forces, does Japan dare to refuse? Would true Japanese right-wingers want to be friendly with the US? Who knocked Japan's right wing from its peak into the abyss? It was the Americans. Who completely castrated Japan? It was the US. The emperor was once a mystical religious icon, and ordinary Japanese people could not even hear his voice, let alone meet him. Yet in front of MacArthur, he was just a compliant servant. Did the Japanese right wing suffer its greatest humiliation from Chinese, Korean, or Russian people? No, it was the Americans who inflicted the deepest shame on them. Their sacred imperial authority was treated like a toilet by the Americans, who would not even bother to flush after using it. What meaning is there in Japan amending its constitution to become the so-called normal country? Japan's self-defense forces already rank among the top military powers in Asia and worldwide. But can they confront China and Russia? If Japan continues down the path of militarism, the next time it will not be just 2 atomic bombs. China detonated a 1-million-ton equivalent hydrogen bomb back in the 1960s. Do the Japanese really want war with China? From DF-21 to DF-61, China can perform 10 surgical strikes on Japan and completely correct its belligerent tendencies. I do not believe any of the tough military rhetoric that Sanai Takaichi boasts about. She does not dare, and Japan lacks the strength to support her ambitions. Even funnier are the netizens who are spiritual Japanese and treat her as Japan's Thatcher. It almost made me laugh to death. She is not Thatcher. She is just an upgraded version of Aung San Suu Kyi. Thatcher could directly call President Reagan Ron or Ronnie, which is the mutual respect between Anglos. In the minds of Americans, Japan's prime minister is like how Trump referred to Shigeru Ishiba as Mr. Japan. Anyway, they all have to fawn over the Americans, so Mr. or Mrs. Japan is perfectly fitting. Their real names do not matter at all to the US president. Kim Jong-un was still called his good friend by Trump, but Japan's prime minister truly only deserves the title Mr. Japan. If Sanai Takaichi dared to call Trump Donald, it would be seen as extremely impolite. The British Empire may have declined, but it was after all a victor in World War II and one of the 5 permanent members of the UN Security Council. What qualification does Japan have to compare with it? To be honest, I am one of the few Chinese people who relatively respect Japan. I do not hold much grudge against the historical wars and grievances between our two countries. I hope China and Japan can have the opportunity to coexist peacefully and jointly revitalize East Asia. But I am very clear that Japan has no choice. This is not because Japan's right wing is bad and insists on visiting the Yasukuni Shrine without reflecting on the war. It is because the Americans will not loosen the leash around Japan's neck. Americans are very clear that if Japan becomes a military power again, the first target for revenge would be the US. The Americans would rather destroy Japan than ever let it become a military power again. The netizens hyping up Sanai Takaichi can go rest early and have a good dream. Anything is possible in dreams. If Japan truly wants to revive, it must abandon the ability to threaten world peace again, because China's lessons are too profound. If Japan once again has the capability to threaten China's national security, China will unhesitatingly make it disappear from the earth and will absolutely not allow tragedy to repeat. This is a consensus deep in the genes of the Chinese people. China's decision not to demand massive war reparations from Japan is not because the Chinese have forgotten history, but to tell Japan that money cannot atone for crimes. The next time militarist sentiments arise, the entire nation will have to atone with its existence.